So welcome to this webinar, Career Conversations. This is part 2. Where do you want to be? So one of the major benefits you can offer your mentee is expanding their awareness in any area that you're talking about, letting them see new opportunities, different perspectives, things they might not have thought of themselves. So today, our focus, as I said, is on the second part of the conversation, the last webinar, and you can catch up with the recording of the last one, which was where you're exploring thoughts and feelings, getting them to reflect on what's going on for them. Basically, the question you hold in mind is, where are you now? We dealt with that in the last webinar, but this webinar, we're focusing on the second question, which is, where do you want to be? So we want to generate options, possibilities. We're still getting them to reflect and think for themselves, but we're taking them through this conversation with the aim of helping them make informed decisions. So what we're going to be talking about specifically in this session is expanding their ideas, their beliefs about what is possible. We all have beliefs about what's possible for us, and sometimes we underestimate that. So how do you expand their awareness in that area? We'll also be talking about the research methods. We don't do the work as a webinar. We prompt the mentee to go away and do their homework, to research the possibilities and the options so that they can make informed decisions. So I'll be talking a little bit about research methods, and I'll be spending quite a bit of time on expanding awareness about 7 career moves that they can make. You know, everyone thinks about moving up, but there are other alternatives that can be really fulfilling. And also, even if you want to go upward in an organization, sometimes you might need to make some of these other moves ahead of that. So that's our content for today. So let's get into this first topic about beliefs about what is possible. So it's likely that your mentee will have they'll be predisposed to some beliefs about what is and isn't possible for them. We all do. Now, beliefs are thoughts. They are opinions. They are ideas that we have and assumptions that we make. And they may or may not be accurate. You know, occasionally a person will have kind of inflated ideas about themselves. Sometimes people have well-founded confidence in themselves. But do you know what I found? And give me your feedback on this too. I found that people frequently underestimate their capabilities and their potential. Let me have your feedback. Have you seen this in your mentees in particular? Maybe you're aware of doing it even yourself. There's a phenomena called imposter syndrome. It's common. Have you heard of it? Particularly amongst women achievers. Even when you read biographies or interviews with really significant women achievers, you'll often find them admitting to having this imposter syndrome, which is where you think, you know, they're going to find out I'm not as good as, I'm not as smart as they think, or, you know, those sort of beliefs that limit our horizons and lower self-worth. So I'm looking at a comment. Yeah, Brenda's saying, yeah, it's very true for women. And Laurie is saying, yeah, I agree. Thanks for that feedback. The common thread in these sorts of beliefs, or this kind of self-talk that we say to ourselves, is some sort of variation on I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy of the success that I've had. And often, you know, we base these beliefs about what is possible on limited or incorrect information. And just letting someone else in here. Sorry. So limiting beliefs based on limited or incorrect information. And that's why you're the sorts of things that you'll hear people say, even you need to be alert for these kind of comments that they make. People are not often aware that they're expressing some limited belief, but listen out for these sorts of comments. Tell me if you've heard these. Sorry, my slides don't want to play today. I'm too old for that, or I'm too young for that. I could never do that. I'm not that smart. You know, these self-depreciating comments that people might make that are the evidence, they're the clue that someone has some limited beliefs. I'm going to talk about what to do about that next. So we need to remember that these beliefs are based on limited or incorrect information. They're kind of drawn from fears, and this is why you need to get the mentee to do some research and help them dissolve some of these fears. Sometimes it's based on negative comments or criticism they've got from other people. And sometimes we perpetuate that through our own inner critic. I don't know, do you have this voice in your mind? I know I've got one, this inner critic that's constantly there on your shoulder unless you shut them up or change this self-talk. They've got this negative self-talk that reinforces those limited beliefs and undermines the comments, the confidence that we need to make positive changes. Isn't it amazing that we could actually have an inner critic there that works to undermine our own self-confidence? We're going to get rid of that, or certainly reduce it. And we especially need to do this with our mentees, because this part of the conversation is about generating options and possibilities. If limiting beliefs are holding them back, we need to help them shift that perspective. Okay, and Nick's agreeing as well. So do keep that feedback coming in. So you may remember from previous webinars what I call the mentoring dynamic. This is kind of a model of a mentoring conversation, a model of the way we conduct a mentoring conversation. So traditionally, we've thought about mentors as someone who imparts and shares their knowledge and experience, but we know that a good part of mentoring is actually about asking questions, listening, and actually drawing the mentee out. So for us, in this part of the conversation, where it is all about, well, where do you want to be? Where do you want to go? We're going to balance those two aspects of the mentoring conversation. We're certainly going to do a lot of asking questions, and I'm going to give you sample questions. We're going to listen. We're going to be picking up on those clues when people have these limiting beliefs or they're undermining their confidence with an inner critic. And we're going to balance that this time with a little bit more input from us, from our knowledge and experience. We're going to also balance that traditional support and that support we've given by building the rapport, building the trust, encouraging and validating this mentee. But now we've won their trust. Now we've won that rapport. We're actually going to use a bit more challenge to provide a different perspective. Now we're going to do this in a very caring and supportive way, but nonetheless, if we're going to expand their thinking, we need to get them out of that comfort zone, out of that self-depreciating inner critic, not having the confidence. We're going to get them out of that imposter syndrome so that they can open up their horizons and see more of what's possible for them. And Expect to hit some resistance and pushback from your mentee here. I know there's a lot of programming that we've taken on board over the years. Some of us have cultural factors that work against us in this, to think more of ourselves and have more of an opinion of ourselves. So be aware there'll be a bit of pushback there, but you can nonetheless stand your ground and encourage bit by bit your mentee to take on more confidence and have a different perspective of what's possible for them. Okay. So first of all, I want to give you some alternatives to some of these beliefs, some ways we can maybe start to shift these beliefs. And it comes from building up a repertoire. Again, we're going to be challenging in the most positive way, challenging our mentee. So when you hear a comment like, oh, I'm too old or I'm too young, and please, if you've encountered these and you've got some great phrases that you use, do type them in and share them with all of us. I'm just going to give you some examples that I've come up with. And all of this, as you know, comes from the book, and there's more of this in the Mentors Toolkit for Career Conversations. Lots more samples there. So you could say something when someone says, oh, I'm too old or I'm too young to do that, this or that. You might come back with a comment, and again, this is your input. This is from your experience and your own knowledge. You could say something like, well, it might be a challenge for someone your age, but others have, and I can too. Now, I've phrased this, I've put my age, because, I'm at an age where it would be easy to think, oh, I'm too old to do that. And look, there's some reality in some of those things. I'm not going to go out and climb Mount Everest. I know my limitations. There are some things that I'm not going to do at this stage. But there are other things that maybe someone needs to challenge and say, hang on a minute, it might be a challenge for someone your age, but others have done it. And you could too, if you really wanted to. And then that opens up a conversation about, is this something you really realistically want to do? Do you have the ambition to do this? If so, well, what are the possibilities there? And of course, there are reality checks along the way. But at this stage, we're trying to open up possibilities. Give me your feedback on these, your comments, your thoughts on this. If someone's saying, oh, I'm not smart enough, or this could be your self-talk, I'm not smart enough to do that. Instead, how about, I'd need to develop the knowledge and the skills for that. It's not something that's about smarts or intelligence necessarily. It's about gaining knowledge and skills. A lot of things that were really hard in the beginning become easier. And it's not about your smarts, it's about your persistence. It's about accessing the information. And where do you get that? So how many of you have learned a new computer program, new technology? There's so much we've had to learn in the last few years. And in the beginning, it's really daunting. But maybe you've got a friend or a mentor or a coach who can help you. Maybe you've just learned, if I look it up on YouTube or if I Google it, there'll be something there that will teach me how to do it. Okay, sometimes people think they're a failure or I failed at that. Well, how about thinking this way? I had a go, it didn't work out, but here's what I've learned. So maybe I'll try again, or maybe I weren't. Maybe there was a lesson in that, So these are just alternate phrases. I suggest that you create your own positive thinking, if you like, ways of challenging these sorts of thoughts that come into your own mind, and also when your mentees come up with these phrases. Someone says, oh, I'm no good, so they discount it. I couldn't do that. I'm no good at that. Well, It could be a steep learning curve. Oh my goodness, how many of us have faced a steep learning curve? It doesn't mean you're no good at it. It means it takes time to get better and better and better at that. You don't know if you're good at it if you haven't tried. And I can't do that. Well, I haven't yet. I don't know if I can or I can't. I just know I haven't tried yet. What do you think of these? I'm going to give you some more examples of this sort of thing now, ways to modify self-talk. I'll give you a few more examples, and then I want some of your ideas. And I'm hoping you're writing some of these down or maybe taking a screenshot, because the objective here is you come up with your own repertoire of phrases that you can use in these situations. So when you're saying to yourself, now these are absolutes, and nothing is absolute. So I always do such and such, or I always fail in these situations, or I always blow an interview or something like that. So how about you rephrase that? Sometimes I have that experience, but now I'll do something different. So take the learning out of the experience. I'll never. So you always know you're dealing with kind of these absolute blanket statements when you hear words like always, never. So we want to, whenever you hear yourself saying always or never, or if you hear the mentee saying always or never, that's something that maybe can be modified. I'll never be able to. I haven't tried yet. Don't know if I will or not. Maybe I can. I can't. Example, I don't know if I can yet. I must. You know, when we have that compelling thought that we have to comply with something, well, how about you change that language in your head? Every time you hear yourself saying must, how about you go, hang on a minute, I might. It's not an absolute. I don't necessarily have to. I might do that. Let's look at the reasons I think I must. How about I give myself some more options here by saying, I might do that. What else might I do? I should. This is one of my favorite or unfavorite words I like to say. Instead of I should, don't should on yourself. Say, I could do that. All right, give me some of your thoughts. Instead of I should, instead of everyone knows. Everyone, that's another absolute. Everyone knows. What would be your alternative to that? And here are some things you hear people say too. Oh, it's awful. It's awful. If you're saying that to yourself all the time, what's it doing to your creativity? What's it doing to your thoughts about options? Okay. And that would be terrible. If you propose a course of action and your mentee says that would be terrible, or if you hear yourself thinking about possibilities and saying to yourself, oh, goodness me, that would be terrible. What could you say instead? Okay. Okay, so we've got a suggestion here, came to me privately, so I won't say the person's name. We have, it might be better. Okay, and Brenda's saying would or could be. Yep, okay. So I want you to think about these phrases when you hear yourself saying them to yourself, and also when you hear your mentees saying these sorts of absolutes and these negative phrases. How can you turn that around? You've got to be careful not to be dismissive about this, and make sure they are feeling heard. Okay. And we've got another anonymous. Everyone knows. Perhaps you didn't hear about this yet. Okay, so yeah, so it's about having your own repertoire of phrases. Remember, we're going to challenge the person in a kind, loving, generous way, but our objective is to expand their thinking when they're talking absolutes. Okay. So let's move on then. So here are some ways that you can actually reduce the effects of that inner critic. limiting beliefs, and negative self-talk. So I want to give you some strategies here. So recognize the inner critic in action. Call it out. I don't think the inner critic would be a new concept to you. Is that the case, or am I over assuming here? So when you hear your own inner critic, call it out to yourself. When you hear someone else's, your mentee's inner critic, explain what the inner critic is, maybe using your own examples, and call it out. So when you hear yourself criticizing yourself, oh, that's my inner critic speaking. I know they have the best in mind for me. They're only trying to help, but actually, I'm not sure that's all that helpful at this stage. Use rational thinking to evaluate how much truth is or is not in the criticism. And this is true of any criticism, whether it's your inner critic, whether it's someone else criticizing you. There's an emotional response to criticism. The neuroscientists tell us that. However, we can use our rational thinking to really weigh that up. How true is that? And what do I need to do with that? When it's yourself criticizing, your inner critic is criticizing you, or when you hear your mentee, maybe it's that inner critic. Is there a more constructive way to self-critique for self-improvement? We all need feedback. We all need corrective feedback at times. I'm not living in a Pollyanna land when it's all positive feedback. We need to know when we're off track. But there are more constructive ways to do it. There are kinder ways to deliver constructive or corrective feedback. And I think we all need to practice compassion for ourselves as well as for other people. I think we need a bit more kindness and love in the world, and learning how to change the self-talk. So I see this as part of a mentor's brief to help a mentee who might have that imposter syndrome, who might have a very overactive inner critic. Help them learn about self-talk and learn to change it where necessary. So as I said, I really want you to create your own toolkit of phrases to use in these situations. Here are some out of my book. This is dealing with the inner critic. Sounds like you may have an overactive inner critic giving you a hard time. And if they look confused, you might need to explain what the inner critic is and the fact that we all have one. Is that really true, or just something your inner critic tells you? We've picked up these criticisms from, the past some way. Perhaps it was so in the past, but could it be different in the future? Isn't that a bit harsh? How would a good friend more kindly give you that feedback? I'm wondering if there's another way to look at that. Now, these are phrases we can use to challenge the thinking in the most constructive way, not dismissing them, being really careful to, we accept what they're saying. That's how they feel now, but we want to help them change. Okay, so I'm getting a request for a recording of today's session. Yes, I am recording it, and I've just set up a YouTube channel. I'll send you the link. I'll pop the link in the chat before we go today so that you can find the recording. And you can direct your mentors to this recording as well. Okay, so one of the things we need to do and help our mentees do is to actually update beliefs. Remember, beliefs are formed from a young age. Some of them serve us well. We need to respect people's beliefs, but also understand that a belief by definition isn't right or wrong. It's a belief. It's an opinion. And people have different beliefs and different opinions. But each of us has the opportunity, if we're open to it, to update those beliefs. And if you're helping a mentee to update their beliefs, And I'm not necessarily talking about cultural or religious beliefs. That's really best left to them. But in terms of a career conversation, we need to help them expand their ideas. So you might offer them examples of other people. You know, we all need role models. Ordinary people do extraordinary things all the times. Maybe you've got a favorite biography. Maybe you've got your own heroes. Your mentee certainly will have their own heroes. And I shared with you an activity in an earlier webinar that helps them identify their own heroes, real or imagined. So if they can see it in other people, it's probably in there as well. So examples of other people. You can also help them as a mentor explore their own history. Where have they made great strides? Where have they overcome obstacles? What have they achieved, large or small? And you help them look at that to see the qualities and the strengths and the skills and the knowledge that they brought to those situations. You may, if it's appropriate, share some of your history too. Now, you need to be really careful here because it's about them, it's not about you. But if you've got a personal example that you can succinctly, very briefly share with them, self-disclose for their benefit, then you may choose to do that too. But be careful about taking over the conversation, and you don't want to make it all about you, but sometimes some examples are quite good. Now, lots of activities around these that you can actually give to your mentee to go and do, and then come back and continue the conversation with you in my book, The Mentors Toolkit for Career Conversations. There's 3 examples there. I've actually got a handout for you here. Let me give you this one here. I'll pop it in again here. And this handout is about updating beliefs about yourself. So it's actually got a little bit about what we've just talked about in that handout. I better move along quickly now. Just if you've got any questions, comments, observations, please share those now, because I'm going to move on to talk about research methods. Now, what you want to do is, this is a career conversation. So what we want to do is have the mentee go and do research. We want them to make informed decisions about their career. So they might need to do some research about prerequisites for potential occupations, for example. And this is where beliefs and assumptions can get in the way. For example, I taught and lectured at a university without a university degree, a qualification. I had lots and lots of experience in the topic, and was accredited for that later on. But even before I was accredited by prior learning, I was teaching people about training and development in a university course. Someone else might assume, well, of course you couldn't teach at university without having a degree or a master's or a doctorate or something like that. So lots of people assume you can't do things. So people might exclude themselves from pursuing a particular occupation before they've actually checked prerequisites. So that's one area of research you might set them a task to go and do. Remember, it's about informed decisions. You do want them to collect information from a variety of sources. And so you'll be teaching them about reliable sources and where to access information. And you may also want to teach them about networking, meeting other people and interviewing other people for information. So we're expanding their sources. So I'm going to talk about each of these in a bit more detail. So prerequisites for potential occupations. Now, we're not at the job application stage. At this stage, we are just casting about for options. and we don't want them to rule themselves out before they've even got to the application stage. So have your mentee gather some role descriptions and job advertisements so that you can discuss, for example, the difference between essential criteria and desirable criteria. The essentials, of course, are the must-haves, and sorry, cat just knocked something over. And the desirable criteria are aspects that would be an advantage, but don't necessarily rule out a candidate. Obviously, an applicant needs the right qualifications for particular professions. I mean, you can't be a lawyer without a law qualification or a doctor or so forth. But in other areas, an exceptional candidate can bypass even some essential criteria. For example, someone with a certificate or a diploma, if they're exceptional, they might get through where the ad actually asks for a degree. And let mentees know that whilst employers expect them to be able to do the job, there's always going to be some learning on the job. So don't exclude themselves too early. And at this stage, we're just opening up possibilities. So naturally, mentees are going to be doing most of their research online for occupations of interest and organisations they might want to work for, and they want to search broadly, not rely on a single source. They can look at social media, news publications, industry associations are a good resource, educational institutions, as well as an organisation's own website. If the mentee is looking at a specific occupation, they should find out about likely pay and the implications of that for them. High paid roles are obviously going to be more competitive, and low paid ones might satisfy them, but not provide sufficient income. They also need to consider the cost and time necessary for any training and education they might need for a particular occupation or in a new field. Interestingly, the best source of information remains word of mouth. So that's not to say you take everything everyone says as being totally accurate, but if you want to know, you go as near to the source as possible. So teach your mentee to reach out to people who work in a field that they're interested in to find out first-hand information. People who work for a particular organisation, what's it like to work there? And perhaps people and can introduce them to people who they could interview for that kind of information. Websites like LinkedIn can be good to reach out to people in a particular field or a particular organisation. So I'd love to hear your comments, observations on what I've just shared with you before I go on to the third part of this webinar, which is looking at those 7 career moves. So just not seeing any more comments there right now. Okay, so I'm going to keep moving. If you've got a question or comment, do type in. I'll have a look as we go through. So I don't know if it's true that most people these days are looking for upward moves. I know with the people that I used to, a lot of graduates and younger folk were wanting to move up and move up fast. Whether that was a realistic option for them so soon is open to debate, but you will have these sorts of conversations, I'm sure, with your mentee. I guess people still hope to get promoted or move to a higher pay grade regularly, but we know we're working with flatter organisations these days, and a lot of people work in project-based teams, and roles and skills that are in demand do change. And we also know that people are going to have to reskill and update their skill set many times over their career and work life. So we need to think, instead of a career ladder that goes directly up, I'm going to suggest to you we need to think about a career lattice. Now, if you've done any gardening, growing your own vegetables or anything, decorative stuff in your garden, you'll know about a lattice. You put up a lattice and you encourage the plant not only to go up, but to go across, to go laterally, to actually fill that lattice. And that makes it, oh, Anik is saying, I call this basket weaving. Sure, it can be like that too. That's a good metaphor there. Okay, and what it does, it allows growth in many directions, and it gives you, your mentee, lots more option. So as a mentor, you can broaden the mentee's scope for satisfaction too, by increasing their awareness of these various career moves. I'm going to talk about 7 career moves. And I've been inspired by, for a long time, by the work of Beverly Kay. She wrote a book called Up Is Not the Only Way, and she's got some updated material online. I do recommend go and look up Beverly Kay, Up Is Not the Only Way, if this is an area that appeals to you and you want to find out more. So 7 career moves, quick overview, and then I'll go through each of them. Yes, people can move up, but they can also move across an organization. They can even move down, and there's reasons why that is a good move to make. They can move out of the organization, leave the organization altogether. And we'll talk about when that's a good idea and when it's not. Instead of making a career move, they can develop in place. And often that's the option we have to take as a short-term strategy. Again, a short-term strategy is not to move yet, but keep your options open and keep exploring those options. And if you want to, you can completely transform your career into something vastly different to what it is now. So let's have a look at these moves in turn. So move up. It is still possible for some people to move up in an organization the traditional way people have progressed in the past, but it's not automatic. You know, years ago, if you worked in one role for long enough, you would get that promotion to the next grade up, but it's certainly not automatic these days. There's competition for most every role, and you have to prove yourself, and you need to upskill to get the higher up role. It depends upon people enhancing and developing their capabilities and being in an organization that actually has opportunities. I can't tell you the number of people I've spoken to in organizations in the past that said, well, you know, I'm doing all these things, but the opportunities just aren't here. And then, of course, it means they've got to be able to compete with other people, perhaps within and outside of the organization, to get that more senior role. You can move across in an organization, and sometimes that's a really good option to consider because it broadens your experience. It might not change their status and their pay, but they get a broader experience. It means they're more competitive for an upward position later on because they bring a breadth of experience. It gives them greater exposure. They could get exposed to a different leadership style. It can also help them increase their own exposure, their profile, if you like, in the organization. I know I've got a daughter who works in the public sector, and she's moved across in various roles at the same pay grade and grade in the organization, but it's exposed her to different managers, different people in senior roles, who then, when she's applied for things later on, said, oh yeah, I know her work, I'll be a referee for her, or I'd like her in my area. In fact, she's had the situation where people have approached her and said, how about you come across to here? How about you act up in this role for a while and get some more And that's as a result of moving laterally across the organization. It is an opportunity to expand skills and develop, and it can refresh. If you're getting a little bit, blasé, a little bit weary about the role you're in, move across. Different people, different role can re-enthuse you a little bit. Okay, a move down. I wonder if any of you have actually done this. I'm not seeing more comments come in. I'd love to know your experience. Moving down is an opportunity to learn and grow. Think of our lattice. You're not always training those plants to go up or even laterally. Sometimes you let them go down and they grow across, and then they grow stronger. This could be a way to go if you're going to launch a whole new career. And I'm talking about the transformation. Okay, Chris is saying I opted out. Do you want to share some more about that, Chris? You might be thinking about, okay, starting a new business. Well, you've got to, start from the bottom in a business. You might do this again as a short-term strategy to get yourself some more work-life balance. And I think in some cases, the last 2 or 3 years have taught us, well, I'm not sure if I'm up for that anymore. Maybe I'll take a step back and get more work-life balance. Okay, Chris is sharing. Thanks, Chris. I had extra skills to underpin the move. Great. Okay. Now, moving out of the organization. When is this an option? I'll tell you about a friend of mine who I worked with in a particular organization. Oh, I'm going back more than 35 years ago now, but I suspect things have not changed in this particular scenario I'm going to paint for you. So this friend of mine, was an assistant in the marketing department. She was like a secretarial assistant, generally doing all sorts of things, assisting the marketing team, the marketing manager. She liked this marketing stuff, so she went and she studied out of hours. She got a certificate, then she got a diploma, then she got a degree. But she knew, staying in that organization, she would only ever be viewed as an assistant. She had to move out to a different organization, and she went and worked in she got a role as a marketing manager in that organization. Now, it was a one-person marketing department, but she had the title marketing manager and the commensurate pay grade as well. And I went and did some work in that organization with her, and we needed something, and this is how far it goes back to the typewriter days, and we needed something typed up. And I said, well, why don't you type it up? And she said, nobody here knows I can type. The minute they see me behind a typewriter, in their mind, I'm a secretary, I'm an assistant. I'm not a marketing manager. Maybe things have changed since then. I don't know. Everyone does their own keyboard stuff. But back in those days, she knew. And that's why she wisely moved out of the organisation. There can be other reasons to move out. There might be no suitable opportunities for you in that organisation. Make sure, and if your mentee or you are thinking about moving out, you need to do the homework on this. Will you be jumping out of the frying pan into the fire? What is it that's causing you to think about leaving? Now, Chris said he opted out. He had extra skills to underpin the move. Do you have those skills to do that? Is it worthwhile for you? Remember, my catchphrase is informed decisions. By definition, that means decisions that are based on information. Now, just before we go on to the next one, I'm going to pop in there for you the second handout, which is actually a checklist for moving out. So it's one of the activities from the book. And as you'll see, it has the points that I've made. When is it a good idea to move out? Why should you move out? Check off the list and do some homework before you actually do that. So that handout's there in the chat box for you now. So this is about developing in place. The tree above the surface only can grow to the depth and breadth of the roots. So this is about developing the roots of the tree, or in other words, developing your capability. You're also looking for ways to increase your satisfaction in a particular role. What do you want to do more of? What do you want to do less of? What strengths are you able to bring into this role and develop more? This is about growing in place. It's not a forever strategy. It's a shorter term strategy, but people need to understand you don't necessarily get to make the other moves straight away. So do this in the meantime. It's about getting cooperation and collaboration. If you want to do more of what you love, you might need your managers or leaders or supervisors support to expand your role or do your role a bit differently. And you may need the team's collaboration as well. As I said, short-term solution. Similarly, don't move yet. Okay, you want to make that move, but before you move it, do your homework. Think about potential career moves. Really explore them. And the checklist for moving out that I've popped in there's a checklist, an activity for every one of these moves in the book. So you want to help your mentee work through all of the potential moves, even the ones like, no, I don't want to move down. No, I don't want to move across. Maybe persuade them to do some exploration. It may involve further planning, education, and skills. My friend that I told you about, the marketing manager, she stayed doing her marketing assistant job for many years while she got the education, she got the skills, she did the planning for what she wanted to do in the future. Maybe there's an opportunity to test the water. Lots of people volunteer in lots of areas, or take a sabbatical and go and do something else. Have what do they call it? A side hustle. Try before you buy, to test the water. Okay, and the final one is to completely transform your career. And I chose the butterfly here to actually allow us to imagine. We all know the idea that the caterpillar feeds, grows strong, then it has its cocoon and it develops, and then it emerges as something completely different. So you can partially or totally transform your career. And this might involve reskilling and developing a whole new skill set, an alternative career path through formal education. It could mean starting your own business. Now, lots of people have the idea of starting up their own business, and this is something that really needs some mentoring from, it's quite a specialist area, and there's financial issues, there's local laws, there's probably health and safety, compliance, bookkeeping, tax, all of those things to master. So if you're talking to someone, or if you're thinking about business startup yourself, it probably needs a mentor with some experience in entrepreneurship and business management themselves. So just bear that in mind. And again, I emphasize informed decision. Otherwise, people who want to do something find their energy sapped and used up by the business side of running a business. Okay, again, a reminder, all these activities are in the book. So there's, I don't know, half a dozen or more in this whole area that you can look at. Remember, your aim is really to assist the mentee to make informed decisions about their future. And that brings me to the end of the content today. We've still got some time for your questions, so I'll be sticking around. So we talked about beliefs about what's possible, remembering it may or may not, your beliefs are opinions, and thoughts that may or may not be accurate. And you may need to help the mentee update those beliefs and also to deal with their inner critic. I talked about research methods. So checking prerequisites, so they're not assuming they can't progress to some particular role, but collecting information from a variety of sources. And we talked about those 7 career moves pioneered by Beverly Kay. I do urge you to go look at her work. So people can go up, across, down, out of the organisation. They can stay where they are and develop or explore, or they can totally transform the caterpillar into the butterfly. So I'm interested to know what your key takeaways from this session have been, and particularly any actions that you are going to take. We've still got a few minutes, but I will stick around after the hour if you've got further questions. So do type in your key takeaways, your actions, your questions. Just a reminder, we've got coming up on the 26th of August, the 3rd stage of our conversation, which is how do you get there? So this is really, today has been about getting to the point of maybe setting some goals. We then get into the practical aspects of planning. So I'll send you some information about the book later on this morning. It is available online in pretty much every country. And if you want to just find out more about the contents of the book, the link is there for you as well. I'll pop that in the chat box. Sticking around for your questions as long as they're coming in. And just a reminder there's our total model. We've done where are you now? Today was about where do you want to be? Next time, how might you get there? And then the 4th part of the conversation is that review. How's it going now? What do we need to kind of keep doing, change, etc.? So your questions, comments, key takeaways. Okay. So Anik is saying, I really like the addressing the resistance wherever it's coming from first. Yeah. And people do resist. Someone asked me for some advice, and as you'll see later in the year, I'll do another webinar called Be Slow to Give Advice. But, you know, this person was a seeker, and every suggestion I made, they resisted. All I can hope for was it landed somewhere and they'll come back and think about it, because they were quite close to making changes that they said they wanted to get a different result. But if you keep doing what you're doing, don't expect a different result, you know. Okay, Brenda's saying it's important for me to practice compassion and not just state facts. Give a list of do this or try this. Yeah. And you know, compassion starts with ourselves, I think, and it comes back to that inner critic. I think often we're really hard on ourselves, so be kind to ourselves. Okay, so I'm going to pop the link for YouTube into the chat box again for anyone who is looking for that. So I sat and uploaded 6 webinars from this year's webinars the other day. There's also some short videos you might find useful, and do feel free to direct your mentors or even your mentees if you think it's appropriate to that. I said that direct instead of to everyone. Okay, let me do that again. That's the link to the YouTube. Here's the link to the book if you're interested, but you will get an email about that later today. Okay, so, okay, and okay, so Neil's saying changing the imagery from a career ladder to a career lattice is very empowering. Oh, thanks for that feedback, Neil. And I hope you can share that with your mentees. And as I said, you can look up Beverly Kay's work online. There's a lot of information there. I think she's probably got something on YouTube too that'll really expand your understanding so that you can share that with your mentee. She doesn't talk about the career lattice. That's something, and someone else came up with the weaving the basket analogy too. So whatever metaphor works for you. But the career lattice is something I've thought about for a long time and used in my career development workshops, and people seem to relate to that. And Chris is saying, always need to build confidence. In the person trying to plan for their future. All right, I'm going to stick around for any questions, but I'm going to stop the recording now. If you're viewing the recording and you'd like invitations to the live webinars, do subscribe to the Mentoring Works newsletter, and you'll be able to do that. So thanks for being on the line. Stick around if you want to ask more questions, and farewell to those watching the recording. Thanks for watching.